Well, Humpy, first of all, how did you get the nickname Humpy?
Well, my father was a guard on the Red Grange, Illinois team back in the 20s. They caught him smoking Camel cigarettes. And his coach made him run around the field for 30 minutes before practice that year. And so his teammates started calling him Humpy because of the Camel cigarettes and the humps on the camel. So he was a coach, and you can't get rid of nicknames in sports. And so I came along, and I was always tagging along with him, and they started calling me Little Humpy, and it stuck. So when Howard A. Wheeler III was born, my son, we immediately nicknamed him Trip, thus ending Humpy.
You played college football with Jim Hunter. What do you remember about that experience?
He was hard to tackle because he was so skinny. If he hit you with his elbow, it'd cut you. He was good. He was good, very fast, and a good football player. I enjoyed being with him.
Now, you also raced some. How serious an effort was that, or was that just something to do on the weekends?
Something to do on the weekends, and I wanted to get it out of my system, and I was down in Sumter, and we had a big wreck, and a car on top of me, I didn't know who it was, but the fuel was coming down in my car, and I was trying to get out, and finally the driver of the car got out, and it was none other than Cale Yarborough. And he looked at me, of course we'd known each other forever. He said, "Humpy, I think you probably need to do something else for a hobby." That's all it took.
How did boxing come into the picture?
Well, I was born in Belmont, North Carolina, and that was about as rough a town as you could get. I mean, it was brutally rough. And to survive, you had to know how to fight. You had to know how to fight. And so Belmont had a great boxing team. This was back in the 50s when there were 200 boxing clubs in the two Carolinas. And because a lot of people didn't play basketball in the winter because a lot of the high schools, you couldn't shoot a jump shot because the ceiling was too low. You had to get under the basket. So anyway, there was a lot of boxing. And so I just started it, and I liked contact, and I loved it. And I wanted to go to the Olympics, but there was a guy in my way named Cassius Clay. I saw him fight. I was supposed to fight him one time. I saw him fight as an amateur on a card I was on, and I thought, gee whiz, I get ready to hit him. He's going to hit me 4 times as fast as he is. Let me move on to something else.
Now, after college, how did you wind up working with Firestone in NASCAR?
Well, when I got out of school, I went to work for WBTV, a Charlotte station, and I wanted to do something else too. I had too much time on my hands, so Marvin Panch was running this great little high bank quarter mile in Gastonia, North Carolina, and he wasn't doing well, so I bought the track from him with borrowed money, and started racing over there, and I changed what we were doing from expensive race cars to really cheapos, kind of jalopies, and people loved it because, you know, it was a crash a minute, and we charged too much. We charged $1.50 to get in, and these were all mill workers, you know, and so that worked out real well, but we had to close it up because it was too close to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sitting there kind of pondering what to do, and this friend of mine was the PR manager for Firestone Racing, and he left. And I called him, I said, well, who's going to take your place? He says, you are. He says, get up here. He says, I've been trying to find somebody. So I went up there, and they hired me in 1964, January. I went to work for them. The first place I went was Riverside, California.
Oh, man.
Wow.
And I was the only Southern guy there. And the rest of it, you know, were West Coast riders. And Joe Weatherly got killed that day. And so people calling me wanted me to do a story on it. So I did. And he was a good friend of mine, and I hated to see that because everybody did because he was so popular. But I did the story from out there, and that kind of got us going.
Now, I did not know that you knew Joe Weatherly. What kind of guy was he?
Well, he was funny, really funny. Had this red face, Irishman. And he had a big scar that ran down his side of his face from a motorcycle wreck. He was a motorcycle racer before he got into cars. And people liked him, and he was joking all the time. And he and Curtis Turner were big buddies, and it was something else to go out with them. You always wondered whether you were going to make it back. I remember I flew down to Daytona with Turner one time, and Weatherly was in the back. Turner wanted me to sit in the co-pilot seat because I knew a little bit about flying. And he said, "Pops," he called everybody Pops, not to remember anybody's name. He said, "Hand me that map down there on the floor." I looked down the floor, and it was a Gulf highway map. It's a highway map. It don't matter, pick it up. Find me 301. And we found it, and he's looking at it, and he said, "That's perfect." He veered off to the left, and next thing you know, we were on Highway 301 and followed it all the way to Daytona. You know, that was before all this GPS and stuff, and people did what they had to do to get places.
Now, let me see if I got the timing wrong. You went to work for Firestone right after college. Now, somewhere along the line, you were promoting races at Robinwood. Is that correct?
I did that before I went to Firestone.
That's what I want to know.
And then after I left Firestone, because they got out of racing, I got the Concord Speedway, and I ran it for a couple of years. And then the opportunity came up to go to Charlotte, because Bruton and I had been friends forever. We were actually rival promoters that didn't try to kill each other at one time. It was rough back then, folks. And so he asked me if I would consider it, and we talked, and he was living in Illinois at the time. And so that led to me finally saying, "Yeah, I'll take a look at it." I went out there and looked at it. And you know, it had been built in the first race in 1960. Well, they never even came close to finishing it. The only asphalt on the place was pit road and the racetrack. All the rest of it was dirt roads and parking and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I got this famous designer out there called Jack Pennis. And he spent 3 days walking the whole place. And he came back because I wanted him to come up with some graphic stuff that we could do. And I said, "Well, what do you think, Jack?" He says, "Impossible." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, You've done all kind of crazy things, marine land and Land of Oz, etc. What's wrong? He says, "It's too far gone. It's early beer can." And I thought, oh my God.
Humpy, you were at Charlotte in the early 1970s, and that was before NASCAR had really hit its growth spurt. What kinds of challenges did you face in promoting races there in those early days?
Well, getting publicity was the big thing because a lot of your media didn't regard racing as a sport.
Yeah.
So we had to convince them of that, and that was a big challenge. The other challenge, of course, was improving the facility, and that was tough because we didn't have any money. And so the challenge was getting more people in the grandstand, and I knew that if we could spiff the place up, that that would help quite a bit. And now that was back in the days when RJR through Winston was giving people red and white paint, and to kind of spiff the track up. Well, I didn't like that, so I got the paint from them. I traded the red in for brown, and we made it tan. So I painted everything tan to subdue it, to get away from the early beer can. Well, RJR went nuts because they wanted red and white because of their brand, and I finally got over that. But there were so many challenges because, again, we didn't have any money. I remember going up to a nuclear auction in Tennessee. They were closing a dam. And, you know, they overbuild everything when they build a nuclear facility. And so I went up there, had very little money, and so checked in with auctioneer, and here we come. And they got some great stuff. Now, we needed pipe, big time, to drain the place. And so now I found some fabulous pipe there. And it ended up selling for 5 cents a foot, less than, say, Lowe's or wherever. And I mean, it was cheap. So I bought $18,000 worth of it with no money. And then, down the rest of the day, they were auctioning off a stainless steel 50,000 gallon water tank. We needed that because we were having to depend on wells. And so the guy that wanted it so bad, I got to know him out. He had to go to the bathroom, and here comes the stainless steel tank. And I bought was really what it was, a $200,000 stainless steel tank for $3,000. He came back and went berserk. And he says, well, I needed that tank bad. I got to have it. And I didn't want to disassemble that tank and have to haul it to Charlotte. I knew that would cost us a lot of money. So I sold him the tank for enough to pay for the pipe. and
wow.
So he never did know what I paid for that pipe. I mean, that tank. So we had to do so many things like that just to get from one deal to another. I remember a long-term loan. We couldn't borrow money at the time. A long-term loan was for the purse. NASCAR demanded the purse on Wednesday of race week. So I'd borrow the $700,000, $800,000, whatever it was, from the bank Wednesday, send the draft down to NASCAR, and then we had to pay it back Monday. Hopefully enough people showed up that we'd have enough extra to pay the purse.
Wow.
Those were really, really challenges. And finally, we got to the point where my friend Bruton Smith, he came up with the idea of trying to get what's now Bank of America involved. And he knew Luther Hodges, and Luther was chairman of the bank then. And so finally, one day, Bank of America said they would loan us the astonishing amount of $2.2 million for a grandstand addition and the press box. and some sweets. And that really got us going there because it kind of put Charlotte up there where very few other people had feared to go because they didn't have any money either.
What was your working relationship with Bruton like? How was that?
Oh my gosh, it was something else. We became very good friends for 35 years. And we talked almost every day, sometimes at length, about the Speedway or whatever. And so, but at the same time, his son Marcus was coming along. And Marcus worked for me for a number of years. And he's a really nice guy. And I knew that, you know, I was up there nearly 70 and that he wanted Marcus to run the Speedway after I left. So at 70, I had a long, hard road out there. I mean, it was a tough deal. And I had no more reason to work. And so I told Bruton, I said, I'm like to finish out this year and go on. So we did. But at the same time, we kind of got in the crosshairs. You know, the end of anything is not fun. And whatever it is, a marriage, a long-term relationship with somebody, business, etc. And so it ended up kind of on a sour note with Bruton and I. But we've gotten together again and are good friends, and I go see him all the time, and we go places together. So it's good that we got over all that stuff. That happens with partners. I know with Flat and Scruggs, my favorite bluegrass band, they had a split. I mean, these two guys were so good together, and yet they split. And so I talked to Lester Flatt about that, because I love the way he plays the banjo. And he said, well, we didn't speak for 10 years. And he said he was in the hospital. And I went to visit him. And it was just like old times. And that's the best thing I ever did in my life.
Huh.
So it's good to make up when you have a problem with somebody, and usually it's over nothing.
As good as you were at coming up with promotional ideas, there had to be a few that didn't work out quite as well as you might have liked. Is there one or two that stands out to you that maybe you would like to have another chance at?
Oh, yeah. Particularly the largest band gathering. I got into this Guinness Book of Records trying to find out something that we could do at the Speedway. And I found out the largest band gather was somewhere in Europe, and it was 4,000 people. I said, well, we'll get 5,000. So it was for the October race. So I contacted every high school and college in 5 states, telling them we'll put them up for the race, etc., but we want them to be part of a world record. And gosh, the response we got is unreal. So come to race day. Now it's October, it's usually cool. Wrong. We had a heat wave in Charlotte. And so we got all these band members over there on the back stretch, and they're going to walk all the way around to the front stretch. Bad decision. And so the temperature has climbed up to 88. And the humidity is so bad that your water would drip off your nose. And so here they are in their wool uniforms, marching toward the front stretch. And every once in a while, one would fall. We got in the front stretch, and they start playing as a group, which we broke the record. for about 10 minutes. And then they start really falling. And Jay Howard, wonderful pre-race guy for us, Jay said, what do you want to do? I said, the show goes on. About 30 of them hit the deck then. And he looked at me and I said, the show goes off. And so we canceled it. Thank God. We'd probably kill some of those poor kids. Fortunately, we had a good cadre of nurses and stuff there, so they were all treated for heat exhaustion and so forth. But who would have ever thought in October it would have gotten that hot?